Hello and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast for this week. The Magical Learning Podcast is a podcast that looks at important topics in life and business and gives it a light-hearted spin while conveying some of the most important information. And today is no different. We're talking to Cherie Mylordis of Nextgenify, who is talking to us today about reigniting the spark, transforming the bleak landscape of workforce disengagement. If you're finding a lot of disengagement at your workplace, this is a really good episode. It's really fun. Cherie's really well spoken, and I took a lot of things away from it, so hopefully you will too. As always, have a magical week.
Hello everybody, and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast for this week. This week, as you can tell by the title, we have a guest, and we'll get to them very shortly. But first, we've got to check in with Danette. Danette, you're on the call today. How are you going this week? Where are you as well?
So in Canberra, just arrived like 5 minutes ago. I've got some meetings and picking Allegra up, who's flying from Melbourne for the weekend. So we're having a mum, daughter and grandmother weekend this weekend. Have had a great week. Been to Canberra for a planning workshop with a client on Tuesday, and it rained last weekend. We got 5.5 inches, so the farm's all beautiful and green, and we're having gorgeous autumn weather. So life is good. Thanks, Jez.
That's a very optimistic way to look at autumn weather. I think gorgeous, but I love that for you, Mum. Good optimism there. Cherie, how's your week been?
My week's been amazing. I'm working on a project with a global energy company, coaching a team as part of 6 teams. I'm one of the coaches, and we're helping them come up with innovative ideas to accelerate decarbonisation in Asia-Pacific region. And so this week they had their mid-sprint pitches to an external panel of disruptors. So I've been on a screen on a room in Shanghai day and night for the last 3 days, helping them prepare, and they smashed it out of the park. They did an amazing job. Yeah.
That's amazing. And so we're happy that you made this happen as well. You've been international in Shanghai, and now you're on the Magical Learning Podcast.
I know. That's what I love about my work. I'm talking to people all over the place every day. It's wonderful.
Awesome. Well, we're so happy to have you. Well, I think I should jump in now because people have heard your voice. They've heard a little bit about what you do, but this may be the first time they're being introduced to you. So let me tell people a little bit about Cherie Mylordis. Now, before we get into a bit about you, if people want to hear more from you, you were on the Adapt podcast with Danette FM. So I'm going to recommend people go check out that episode for some extra insights. But let's find out a little bit about Cherie. So Cherie Mylordis is the founder of Nextgenify, a Sydney-based work futurist, speaker, transformation and innovation coach on a mission to help organizations reimagine the world of work for a better future. Cherie's ambitious approach is founded on her belief that now is the time for bold leadership and business transformation. The traditional ways of working are no longer fit for purpose in our post-pandemic world. With more than 30 years of experience in delivering groundbreaking initiatives and consulting, in consulting, large corporates, government and non-profits, Cherie credits her 5 years working on the Sydney 2000 Olympic Games with shaping her approach to purpose-driven leadership and collaboration on a large scale. So Cherie, I mean, we couldn't ask for a better person today to join us on the Magical Learning Podcast. Thank you so much for being on.
It's my pleasure, and a warm hello to all your listeners. Thank you for having me.
Yes, no, it's a pleasure. So let's talk about the topic. The topic, as people know, if they haven't listened to some episodes before, but if, you know, I want to highlight that we hand out to our guests the option to tell us what topic they want to talk about. And you've picked a great one for us today, reigniting the spark, transforming the bleak landscape of workforce disengagement. This is a big problem. We've heard a lot of things that sort of float around this area. So before we actually jump into the conversation today, do you want to tell us a little bit about why you chose this topic?
Sure, Jez. So, Gallup have just released recently their 2023 State of the Global Workforce Report, and it's really alarming. So 2/3 of people are passively disengaged and 13% are actively disengaged. So that's 46%, nearly half of people they surveyed are basically not like, they don't love their job. They don't probably even like their job. And this actually lines up perfectly with my research. So I interviewed and surveyed 200 leaders in a 2-year study. And I found the same thing. So it's very consistent in that people are saying they're not doing their best work. So in my research, I found that 1/3 of people started by telling me they are doing their best work. 2/3 said sometimes or no. But when I delved deeper into other questions with that third, really what I discovered was they were saying, I'm good at what I do. Because when I asked them the subsequent questions, they gave the same reasons as the others as to why they're not able to do their best work. So, the big study and my study, it all lines up. People are not doing their best work. And when you think about it, that actually impacts our lives, not just our work, right? We spend 90,000 hours of our life at work. And there's a wonderful quote I love by Annie Dillard that says, the way we spend our days is, of course, the way we spend our lives. And so, if we're spending all this time completely disconnected from our work, it has a huge impact on us. And I just think that's not okay.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's a great thing to talk about. It's certainly things I've heard a lot about in the sort of sphere. So I think we may as well just jump straight into it. So let's start with Danette. Danette, what was your questions, and tell us a bit about why you chose it.
So Cherie, I always pick two questions because I have that curious mind. So my first one is, you mentioned that many of the companies are still operating in practices that are a century old. So I'd really love you to tell me more about those, obviously really old models, which are probably pretty outdated, and the impact they're actually having in terms of the statistics you were just sharing with us. And then I'll come to the second question.
Sure, Danette. Well, if you go back to the Industrial Revolution, right, when people came out of the farms and they started working in factories, I could show you an org chart from 1917 that doesn't look that different from an org chart that we can see today. So it's that typical triangle with those clever executives at the top and the workers below. Now, back then, work was more about using our muscles, not our brains, right? Now, of course, we still use our muscles sometimes at work, but we rely much more on using our brains. And so that triangle with that, clever people at the top disseminating very specific instructions for repetitive transactional tasks doesn't really bring out the best in our people today. And also those rigid job descriptions, right? So people are in a box. This is your job. You're in this box. Here are your instructions, and this is what you need to do. Stay in your lane. Don't give us any ideas. Don't give us anything else. Just do what you're told, right? Now, we're saying now with organisations, we're empowering our people. We're bringing innovation and all of these things. But if we're still working within a triangle with boxes of very specific job descriptions, then we're constraining people. We're holding our people back, and we're holding our organisations back from what they could achieve. So that's why I say we're stuck in outdated practices that go back a century.
Nice, I love that answer and totally agree too. So when you and I chatted on the Adapt with Danette FM podcast, we found we had a common friend who you worked with at the Sydney Olympics a couple of years ago. So my next question is, you've had that first-hand experience in implementing the principles around making organisations better and stuff, and obviously through working in what was a really major global event. So I'd love for you to share that story with the listeners and viewers, because we obviously are recording this as well, and the outcomes that happened.
Well, it was a long time ago, but it was a pivotal point in my career, and I'll tell you why. So I'd come out of a top-tier consulting firm, and this ad came up in the newspaper, as it did back in the day, to work in the strategy team of the Sydney Olympic Games. And I thought, wow, that is just my dream job. How amazing. I got the job at the first interview. I remember screaming into the phone to my mum, telling her I got this amazing job. But then when I showed up on day one, I was actually terrified because I'd never even been to an Olympic Games. So how was I supposed to do the strategy for this, biggest event in the world in the year 2000? The eyes of the world are looking at you. There's a fixed date. You can't change it. Very specific requirements, right? So I was actually feeling that imposter syndrome on steroids. But what happened was, I was in this small group of people like me who'd come out of consulting, and we were required to work with the 40 functional experts of all the functions. So think ticketing, accommodation, security, spectator services, yada, yada. We had to facilitate a process of them all developing their strategy, their business plans, their budgets, their risk assessments, and then we had to glue it all together. And we just rolled up our sleeves. So we were all Olympic rookies, right? We were young people who were enthusiastic. We rolled up our sleeves. We pushed the tools in those days to the limits, and we put it all together like a big Lego set, and we built the strategy. Now, I went on to have a number of other roles over the 5 years that I worked on that project. And at the Games time, which is 60 days, it's not 2 weeks, it's torch relay, the Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games, in the main operations centre, watching it all and helping to, respond to issues. So I had this incredible journey of a number of different roles. And what happened was we were really given air cover by our executives. So there was a lot of politics, as you can imagine. There's the International Olympic Committee has very specific requirements. The contracts are this thick, right? Huge requirements of what we had to deliver. We were not given any playbooks. We were not given any plans, any procedures, any examples. We were just told what we had to deliver. So we just had to figure it out. And luckily we had amazing people that we came up with this incredible approach. And by the time we got to the closing ceremony, Sydney was declared the best games ever. Now, no games ever since then has had that accolade. And on top of that, we actually achieved a lot of firsts. So as Australians, we're down the bottom of the planet and we're a smaller country compared to a lot of cities and countries that put on the Games. But we were the first organisation or first organising committee to integrate the Olympic and Paralympics together as one big event. And so that meant there was a seamless transition from one Games to the next, which hadn't happened in the past. And our playbooks and plans and procedures were then acquired by the International Olympic Committee to offer all future games, to give them something else to go by. So we're really proud of that, and we achieved many firsts. And we actually share a special bond. That has shaped our identity. And so former colleagues, we share this special bond to this day because we had this life-changing experience doing our best work. And so that really inspired me to, think big and bold and go after something really purpose-driven and really audacious. And I found that was lacking, a lot since then. So that's why I sort of have kind of embarked on this quest. Like, how do we make work more meaningful? How do we help people feel more engaged and achieve better outcomes?
I love that story, and thank you for sharing more on this podcast. And just the impact that when you can do something where all of those constraints are taken away and you just bring out the best, like how extraordinary. And imagine how, like from a mental health perspective, from a whole stack of perspectives, workplaces could be extraordinary. So I'm loving this quest of yours, Cheri. Thank you so much. And I'll hand over to Jez for the next question.
Thank you.
Yeah, amazing effort. What a great story to kind of tee up everything that we're talking about here. I love that, Cheri. And congratulations on a great games. It was awesome. Let's jump into Allegra. So Allegra's picked a question based on your work in 3D model. So I'm very fascinated by this. So Allegra's asked, can you introduce us to your work in 3D model? What inspired this concept?
Sure. So over the last few decades, I've really noticed that a lot of people I've worked with feel, I guess, undervalued and unfulfilled at work. And it really bothered me. It's made me feel very unsettled. And I could see people that had incredible talent, incredible potential, and it just wasn't being realised. And so, that was really a concern. And then I'd had that Olympics experience where I'd seen something amazing. And then I started to find out more about other more radically progressive companies around the world that are doing something different and achieving really extraordinary outcomes. So that ignited this quest, as I said, to sort of find out more. Well, what is possible and what is the contrast between what I was seeing every day? And so I've discovered these organisations around the world that do things radically differently. And they were very diverse, like different industries, different countries, different businesses, but they were really, achieving these extraordinary outcomes. And so I really wanted to understand that. And when I explored that and bringing my Olympics experience into it as well, I felt that there were three common traits, that they were these special qualities that these companies had that really enabled something special to happen. And so I just described these traits as 3 Ds. And the Ds stand for dare, ditch, and dial. And so then I came up with this term of, well, we could call it work in 3D as a bit of a fun play on the word 3D. And when I actually ask people without telling them what my 3Ds mean, I've asked a lot of people, if I was to say that the future of work is to work in 3D, what would that conjure up in your mind? And people say things like, oh, I bring my whole self to work. I'd look at work from different angles and perspectives and have a bigger picture. And some people talked about, 3D goggles and those sorts of things. But instinctively, they responded with something positive and powerful and future-focused. And then when I go deeper and say, well, my 3Ds mean something else as well as that, like that's all great, that makes sense. And we can also talk about the dare, ditch and dial. I got a really, really, always a curious response, and people really like that idea. And so, I've really just expanded on that, and happy to explain what each D is if that's of interest and what that means.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm fascinated. I've got my notes already prepped, ready to take notes on each one. So I reckon dive into it, Cherie.
Okay, sure. Okay. So the first D is for dare, and that means really having a bold purpose. And so as you can imagine, the Olympic Games is, you couldn't ask for a bigger purpose, bringing 200 countries together, bringing their athletes together to compete in peace. That's like an ultimate purpose-driven goal. And so that organisation had purpose already very clear, right? We were given that purpose. But in some cases, the purpose isn't so clear. And what I find is when an organisation defines their purpose in a way that it has more of an external impact, so they're not just saying this is what we do, but they're talking about what's the impact they want to achieve and why they exist. So for example, TED, ideas worth spreading. That's a great purpose statement because it talks about why they exist. If we think about others, for example, Disney, to create happiness for people of all ages everywhere, right? So it's this banner that sort of explains why they exist. It doesn't talk about what you do or how you do it. So it is enduring. It usually doesn't have to change when you evolve your strategy. So when Disney brought in Disney Plus and as well as their theme parks and things, that purpose still holds. So if a company has a purpose statement that describes that impact that they want to achieve, that can really galvanise not only the people that work for the organisation, but it can also attract people who want to do business with them, either in a customer base or in a business sense. So that's the first thing that I think really has to be there. And the most extraordinary organisations in the world all have a bold, quite audacious and inspiring purpose. And you may never get there, and that's okay. I work with a charity in New South Wales called Odyssey House, New South Wales, and they offer programs for people struggling with drug and alcohol addiction. Now, their vision statement is a world free of addiction, and that actually qualifies for my definition of a purpose statement. Now, Odyssey House, New South Wales is 150 people, so I'm not sure they're ever going to achieve a world free of addiction, but that inspires how they show up every day. And it also inspires and encourages them to connect with other players in this space and to share learnings and collaborate. So that's the first one, dare. The second one is ditch. And this is really important because if we're stuck with all these constraints that are slowing us down, outdated ways of working, lots of admin, long processes, we can't really do our best work, right? And sometimes we're too embedded in the work to actually see that these things aren't really serving us anymore. So sometimes you've really got to take a step back to see what's actually no longer fit for purpose. And my favourite example of this one, Jez, is a company I've been working with in the Philippines over the last few years. It's an enormous conglomerate. It has an airport, a power company, a food group, a bank, and much more. And, the Philippines is a country that's really trying to improve, opportunities for its people to help avoid, millions and millions of people have to go overseas, right, to find work elsewhere and really help with their families' needs. So this company is a very successful multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, but they're not satisfied with just being a successful organisation. They really want to advance both business and communities. So one of the initiatives that was identified when we were working there as coaches was, how do we look at these outdated processes? So this concept was created called Super Ditch Day. And it was in September 2022, and it had all branding and lots of communication telling everyone about it. And so people were invited to form teams of super ditchers. They had T-shirts, there was all this, great buzz about it to really make it fun and exciting. And on this particular day, the group's CEO, launched it, and there was lightning bolts behind him on the screen, and the whole buzz happened. And so teams all around the organisation worked together in that day. And that didn't have to be the team they're currently in. They could form a team with anybody. And they came up with these ideas on what were the things that no longer serve us. 1,700 ideas were pitched, and 400 processes were changed as a result of that day. So this made the Manila news. You can look it up, and if you look up Super Ditch Day in the Philippines, you'll see it. So it's a wonderful example of really saying great ideas can come from anywhere. And that old adage of this is the way we've always done things, it's just not okay. Don't cling on to that, Inspire your people, give them permission to share ideas on what could change. And you never know what you might get out of it. Imagine the money that is being saved from that business. Imagine the efficiencies. Imagine the purposeful work that they'll be able to do now by changing 400 outdated processes. So that's ditch. And then once you've ditched and you've freed up some time and space and capacity, then you can dial. You can dial up better ways of working that really enable people and the business to thrive, right? And so it's really about going back to that hierarchy. It's about, really disrupting that. It's about giving people more autonomy, giving them clarity on the goals that you're trying to achieve, the problems you're trying to solve, or the opportunities you're trying to create, and to give them permission to go after that in a way that they see fit, right? So again, you never know where the good ideas might come from. And if you're giving people permission to use their initiative with clarity on your direction, so they can't just do anything, like here's where we're heading, here's the North Star, again, it builds that intrinsic motivation. You get people more energized, more enthusiastic, and showing their initiative. So that's how you can get those extraordinary outcomes. And that's what I see in these organizations that I follow around the world. So that's the 3 Ds. Dare, ditch and dial. And I am on a mission to really raise awareness of this term, because I think people can, if they just understand those 3 things, you can start anywhere by bringing that in, right? You can start with your current team. You could, if you're volunteering in the community, you could think about that. You could even bring it into your day-to-day life, right? It really is quite a simple concept. And there's layers underneath it, of course, but I really just wanted to find something practical that could ignite a spark for people that are disengaged at work.
100%. And I also think that if you want to wear 3D glasses while you do these things, the better.
It might be even more fun. I love that.
This actually is very relevant to me, what you're just talking about, Cherie, because I've had this exact experience this very morning, where I sent a message to a delivery service, something that was delivering me something. It got dropped off at the wrong address, and basically I said, this never arrived, and their process was to go search all these other trucks and stuff. And I thought, well, this doesn't make sense because someone's clearly said, yes, I've dropped something off. Why are we checking all these other things? So I was like, hey, I appreciate you looking for this, but maybe what could be a better system is clearly something's been dropped off. I don't think you need to spend man hours looking in your warehouse. It's not there. It's okay. But that was their immediate process. There's a ditch right there.
Absolutely. You could give them that ditch.
Yeah, exactly. So very good. All right. Well, I wanted to jump into my question here because we've done a little bit of... my question was about the sort of overview of your research regarding employee engagement in today's workplace. And we've done a little bit of that. But one word that I haven't been saying because I've been trying to save it for this question, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it. It's a big hot button topic right now, is quiet quitting. So I guess sort of meshing those two together, can you give us sort of your findings in regards to employee engagement, anything that you haven't given us so far? And then what does quiet quitting look like and why is it becoming more common?
Sure. Well, I think quiet quitting is people, they have a job, they're showing up, they're doing the hours, whether that be in the office or at home, but their heart's not really in it. So they're watching the clock. I guess it's more of a transactional focus, like tell me what you want me to do and I'll do those things. But I'm not going to think about really adding value. I'm not thinking about going that extra mile. I'm just doing what I'm being told and I'm doing the bare minimum. And then I want to finish work as soon as I can so I can get on with my life, right? Whereas the alternative is people do feel, engaged and connected and inspired and they're lit up and they're passionate because they feel like they're contributing to something that is worthwhile and meaningful. So that's the contrast. And so, when you see this research coming out where those statistics I talked about, 46% of people are disengaged at work. The Australian figures are 4 out of 5 people are disengaged, and they've actually put a figure on it, which is $2 billion a year impacting our economy. So it's just, to me, it's just so disappointing and disheartening that we're just stuck. I feel like it's just leaders potentially are just climbing the corporate ladder. They're just wanting to be that next level person that they've seen ahead of them. So they've got this mindset of climbing the corporate ladder and getting to those high status positions. And because they were led from a position of power and authority and status, and those are the clever people that tell us what to do, they decide the strategy, they set the direction, and then they cascade that down. That's what people that are, building, growing in their career, that's what they're striving to be, right? And so that's just, again, that's the way we've always done things. So that's how the next level of leadership goes. And I hear quite heartbreaking stories every week, especially of sort of the Gen Z professionals whose spirits are being crushed. They're really being treated terribly. And, these are the leaders of the future. And there's evidence coming through that Gen Z professionals are actually wondering if they want to be leaders. But for me, I think it's they don't want to be the leaders that they see. I think they can be amazing leaders, and because we know that this generation cares about purpose-driven things, they've got incredible initiative, ideas, they're so smart, but they don't want to do that. They don't want to be at that level in that stuffy office and giving orders. So we've got this disconnect. And so I think if we can shine a light on what good looks like, and we've got proof points all around the world, but most people don't even know these options exist and they don't know where to look. So if we can shine a light on that alternative, we can help address the quiet quitting.
Well, Cherie, I think that's a perfect answer to lead into a great question that Kanika's got about the future of work, because I think that you're teeing us right up into that. So it's what's on my mind right now. So it's a good thing Kanika's already asked this. Which is, so through your work with senior leaders this year, are you noticing any shifts in their strategies? Because I guess that would be the next question after what you're just saying.
Yes, I really am. I'm actually noticing that companies are going bold. So I think they feel like we've sort of got through COVID. Last year was a bit uncertain. Where are we at? Where are we going? Are we going to have a clear runway ahead of us? And this year, I feel like senior leaders in organisations are saying it's time to go bold. We're bringing in big transformation strategies. We really want to go for things that are more meaningful, very strategic and more impactful. So a lot of leaders I'm talking to are actually being promoted into more senior roles. So they're really grappling with how do I show up as an effective leader that is fit for purpose and future focused, but also how do I drive much bigger, bolder transformation? So I'm really encouraged to see that, because I'm hoping that that's really going to set a more energetic direction that will ripple down and help create a better sense of, there is an opportunity to do work that matters. There's an opportunity to make more of a difference and do meaningful work. So I'm really excited by that, and I'm seeing that across multiple industries. So hopefully that's a real sign that there's a shift coming.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's very exciting. I think everything that you're talking about, even just having a leader that would come out and have lightning bolts behind them, is an exciting way in the way things are changing. I wanted to share one leader that I liked one time. I used to work at another business, and every Christmas party, he was from Japan, he'd fly in and he'd sing karaoke for everybody at the start of the Christmas party. I don't know why, but everybody loved it. It was awesome. That was exciting. Let's jump onto Alan's question, because I think this is a really good one, maybe for people that are actually in the situation right now and they want to work out what's next. Alan asked, for someone stuck in a disengaged workplace, what steps can they take today to begin making a change?
I love this question. Thank you, Alan. There's a lot you can do. the first thing you can do is really try and uncover your personal purpose. And I actually run sessions on this with people because I do it at meetups, I do it at conferences, because it's about, well, what really lights you up? What's the essence of you? What do you care about? So I run the session with some really thought-provoking questions that sort of takes quite a wide sweep for them to really think differently and then come into, helping them define their own personal purpose statement. And that to me is key, because if you can really identify what you care about, what lights you up, that's the first step in being able to do meaningful work. Then, if you can identify what is the purpose of your organisation and find some sort of intersection between that, that's really the ultimate way to do work that matters. So I encourage people to really think about their own purpose, reflect on that, think about, what lights you up, what feels like play to you that's really hard for others. If money was no object, what would you love to work on? What would be the top causes you would love to influence if you could truly do the best work of your life? So thinking about questions like this can start to uncover what people really care about. Then I encourage people to really look at the organisation they're currently working for or with and really try and uncover, does this organisation have a purpose statement now? Maybe they call it a vision, maybe they call it a mission. A purpose statement is a bit higher than that. It sort of transcends a typical vision statement or mission statement, but it's really about that external impact you want to achieve. Now, if you can't find that, I would encourage people to actually ask their leaders, do we have a clear purpose? Maybe even share some articles or some examples of that. If you're working on a project, make sure the purpose of that project is clear. Try and find that golden thread to what you're working on and what actually is the organisation about and where is it going, right? And the purpose of your own purpose, it may not be super obvious. So it might not be a really tangible link between what matters to you and what matters to the organisation. I'll give you an example where it might be a tangible link. So Patagonia is a very famous clothing company, outdoor clothing. They're passionate about the environment, right? So their purpose is to save our home planet. Now you might think, well, how could a clothing company do that? So they actually encourage their customers to really, look after their gear, recycle their gear. They will repair their gear for them rather than just try and sell them another jacket, right? But then the founder went even further, and he's now set up a trust so that all profits go to helping with climate initiatives. So he's actually said, we've made the earth our only shareholder, right? So that's an example of a really strong purpose. So if you cared about the outdoors and, you're really concerned about the environment, then you might want to go and work for Patagonia, right? There'd be a really clear link between your purpose and Patagonia's purpose, right? And I'll give you another example. So I was recently at a breakfast at Odyssey House, the charity I mentioned earlier, and it was to thank supporters who in some way contributed to the organisation. And I met a young woman at that breakfast, and she was very well dressed. She looked like she was about to go to the office straight after the breakfast. And I got talking to her, and I asked her why she was at the breakfast. And she said, well, I work for a financial services company, and my company just donated $10,000 to Odyssey House. I said, wow, that's amazing. And how great that you were able to come and represent your organisation. And she said, well, it was actually my idea. I said, oh, tell me more. She said, well, when I was a little girl, I lived in the Odyssey House Family Recovery Centre with my parents, who were both struggling with addiction. And by keeping our young family together, my parents were able to overcome their addiction and go on to lead full lives. And she said, my father told me to never hide where I came from. So this young woman pitched her story and her idea to her organisation in the hope that they would pick Odyssey House as the organisation they would support, and they did. And so there, you can imagine how motivated and connected that young woman is to her organisation, because they have responded to something that she cares about. So that's an example of where it might not be overtly what the organisation does, but this young woman has found a connection between what she cares about and the organisation's values, and in this case, really specific actions. So, yeah.
Yeah, wow. What a great way to sort of bring that in. If you're someone who's like, I'm not feeling this, you can engage other parts and other passions through your work. I think that's such a great way to put it, Cherie. And I think that leads us perfectly into our final question, which is from Mark here, which is, and I can't think of a better way to end this conversation, at least the questions portion, which is reflecting on your journey. What has been the most significant lesson you've learned about transforming workplace culture?
Well, it comes back to purpose again, Jez. You know, it's really the cornerstone of everything. If you don't have clarity of purpose in terms of what the organisation's trying to achieve, what the transformation's trying to achieve, it's really difficult to galvanise the energy and the action and to really achieve meaningful outcomes, right? So I always start with purpose. I worked with an organisation recently, the Institute of Public Administration, New South Wales, and you know their whole business model was person-to-person events and learning. And then when COVID hit, their business was not looking viable. Now, they needed to have a rethink of their whole business model, but we started with purpose. And what we worked out is by having a few short sessions. It's only 3 sessions with a leadership team where you can actually uncover your purpose. And so the purpose that they defined was to inspire public service and enrich society. Because they really wanted to get deep about, well, why do we do these events and these learning programs for public service professionals in New South Wales? And, you know, why do they exist? Well, they exist to serve our society, right? And so they want to inspire them and equip them with, you know, events and networking and capabilities to help them do that better, right? So that really set the scene for how do they transform and how do they partner with sector leaders, but also how do they inspire and equip members to want to show up. And then that led to the whole sort of brand campaign and brand slogan, which is you at your best for New South Wales. So there's an example of where, you know, if that wasn't identified, if that wasn't uncovered, yes, their business model could be reviewed, that transformation plan or program could be, you know, mapped out. But would it have been as effective? Would it have really ignited the response that it did? Perhaps not. So I guess, yeah, my advice is, again, coming back to what's your purpose? What's your organisation's purpose? How can you find any connection with that? Because it's really hard to turn up and work hard if you can't draw on intrinsic motivation. So I would really encourage your listeners to think about that. And if they really can't find a connection, then I think it begs the question, is this the right type of work for you to do? Is this the right organisation to work for? But, you know, usually you can find some connection, but if you can't, then perhaps you need to stop and reflect and explore other options. Because, as I said earlier, we spend an enormous chunk of our lives at work. And this was actually my final question in my research, right? If you could do the best work of your life, what would be the top causes that you would love to influence? Now, when I asked this question, people paused and thought, and then their eyes lit up and they told me what they would love to do if they could do the best work of their life. Now, a year later, I'm not sure if any of them are going after that. And so it's like, well, what's stopping you? How might you explore this idea that you have that's lighting you up? How might you explore a way to make that happen? Whether that be in your formal work or whether that be something you do on the side. You know, how might you make your life more meaningful and do something that's more impactful?
Yeah, great insight. And I think that's such a good takeaway for anybody that's listening to this and kind of, you know, has been taking down all this information. I've taken down so many notes. I'm sure all our listeners have as well. But a great way to kind of put that all together. Let's jump into some final thoughts. So, Danette, I might start with you. Any final thoughts on today's conversation and just sort of reigniting the spark, transforming the bleak landscape of workforce disengagement?
Such a great conversation. Totally appreciated it. All of the shares that you had. And I was actually thinking... the IPA New South Wales, I used to do their national magazine many years ago, and it is such a beautiful organisation.
Really?
Yeah. So they took it from a Canberra-based one to a national one, and I was lucky enough to sort of lead that transformation. So great organisation, and I love inspiring the public sector because I do a lot of work with the public sector as well. I really loved that focus on purpose, because totally we're aligned on that, and we've had some conversations around this before. Just for people to start to think about that. And I really like that last question that you said, like, my life, I'm on purpose, I love what I do. And there are, as you said, so many people out there that aren't taking that opportunity to really see ways that they could align what their purpose is with what they do, or move on if it really isn't in alignment. I reckon we're going to get you back for another conversation, because this was so much fun. So thank you so much. There's lots of so's in my saves there. Great session.
Thank you, Danette. It's always lovely to chat with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Danette. Great questions and great insights today. I just also wanted to share, I've taken down so many notes. The Dare, Ditch, Dial model, I think, is a must takeaway for me. And also just some of the questions that you asked about asking yourself are also such good questions to ask at a job interview if you're going for the job. What is the purpose? If money was no object, what would you do? To get an idea of also those insights, I think, from the business you're going to work for. So great takeaways for me personally. Cheri, did you have any final thoughts on today's conversation and reigniting the spark, transforming the bleak landscape of workforce disengagement?
Well, I would encourage your listeners to really think about their own purpose, as I said. But, in the world where you work right now, you could ignite a conversation with your teams today. You could talk to them about what might we dare to do that really aligns with the direction of the organisation, and how might we make a difference? What could we ditch that doesn't really serve us? Are there things that are slowing us down? Maybe it's all those just repeated meetings that are just in our calendar that we just show up to. Do we need to go to all of them? Do we, the reply all email chains drive me crazy. There are far better ways to connect if it's just a quick chat. There's all these chat tools, whether you're using Teams or Slack or WhatsApp, whatever it is. So are we using the most effective tools for communication? And are there things that are just slowing us down, that are taking us away from the core work of delivering value, right? And then what could we dial up? What could we do that's a bit more effective, a bit more, encouraging initiative, more autonomy? You might be surprised what you could actually do without having to ask anyone for permission. What could you do within your bubble? And then shine a light on that, talk about that with others and spark that curiosity. And you might be surprised what ripples might be created from just doing that.
Absolutely. And, I had, speaking of long meetings, I had someone the other day mention to me, they said, it's wild that we have 90-minute meetings and we don't achieve anything. I watched Shrek recently, that's 90 minutes, and they took down a whole dragon, they went to a castle, a lot happened. So can we make these 90 minutes more effective is really a question. But I love that insight, Cheri. Now, Cheri, I'm sure like many people, like myself, listen to this conversation going, Cheri's got a lot of great insights. I want to learn more. Where's the best place for people to reach out to you, Cheri, or any resources you direct them towards?
Absolutely. Well, I'm very active on LinkedIn, and I like to share lots of insights and tips on LinkedIn. And I think I'm the only Cherie Mylordis on LinkedIn, so I should be pretty easy to find. So I really encourage your listeners to connect with me, drop me a note, tell me what you're doing. Is there anything you're interested in learning more about? And then there's my website, which is nextgenify.com. Information in there about the coaching work I do. I've got some really good blog articles in there that I'd love your listeners to have a look at. But just make contact. I would love to connect with your listeners and just get to know them and what they're up to. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Cheri. What an awesome conversation. Again, if people want more from you on a podcast that's got Danette on it, we highly recommend jumping over to the Adapt with Danette FM podcast and checking out that one. But I want to say thank you so much for today's conversation. Thank you so much for the topic. Danette, great insights and what a great conversation. And to everybody that's been sharing, listening and enjoying this podcast, as always, have a magical week.